They say cash is king, so let it be.
What the hell's happening in the economy right now?
First of all, I would say the economy is really interesting. Some things never go out of fashion, like delivering value for money, building relationships, following up consistently, doing what you say you're going to do. If I came to you right now and doubled the amount of demand that you currently have, how could you handle it? And that's the first and foremost place that you need to think of when it comes to scale. People can't pay you unless you charge them. You can negotiate on your cash flow. You don't have to negotiate on price, just negotiate on the fact that you have the cash to pay for things quickly.
The news at 6 o'clock that's blurring on the TV. I'm like, oh my God, what is happening out there? What are they saying about tariffs, Stuart? What does that mean?
Challenges that you're seeing presented at 6 o'clock offer opportunities for you, but you have to be...
People don't just want to be sold to you anymore. They want help. They want to know where they're at, what's working, and what they need to do next. That's why quizzes and scorecards, they work so well, and ScoreApp makes it easy to build one. You create a short set of questions based on your expertise, and within minutes, your audience gets a personalised result with clear next steps. It's like giving every potential customer a mini strategy session, and they love it. In return, you grow your email list with people who actually want what you offer, and you gain insights into what they need the most. ScoreApp helps you give value first and grow faster because of it. To try out ScoreApp, visit scoreapp.com/dig. Welcome to the Dig podcast. Now, I've just said to my guest, you're kind of making history here. So it's not often we have returning guests, but when we really feel like they bring so much value and we love them as a guest, we're like, will you come back? And today, Susan Hayes Culleton is here. Thank you for being on the Dig podcast, Susan. The Positive Economist. Loads of you will know her anyway. I love her. Met her at an event and that was it. I was hooked ever since. But you are, Susan, you've just recently got a new position as well. Talk to us. I'm not going to talk. I want you to talk. Tell us what you're doing now.
Believe me, I'm talking.
I know you've no problem in talking. What is your new position as well in your new job role?
My new position, in addition to all that's going on with the company, and we'll talk about that as well, is that I now present an international economic show on Newstalk on Sunday mornings. And it also goes out as a podcast as well. But it's all around what's going on in the world at the moment. And Caroline, it is, of course, really, really changing. And so while we talk about the things that you would expect us to talk about, whatever the big stories are at the time, we also look at other things too, like the economics of music streaming, the economics of charity shops, the economics of Ozempic. And as well as sometimes it's a business angle, sometimes it can be a personal finance angle. And I'm loving every moment of it.
I know, and I can see you buzzing. Like, I see all the stuff you're doing online as well, and I'm like, first of all, I'd be thinking, how the hell does she do all that? But I know, because you're so passionate about it, you just flows out of you because it's what you love, isn't it? Like,
for sure, but sure, I'm looking in the mirror there now, to be fair.
I know, everybody sees, I suppose, people in different lights and things they're doing, but I think you're amazing, and the reason why I love you is because you always tell us how and the practical ways, and this is what we think, and this is what you should be doing, and you always turn it into layman terms, and that's what we need, because those things you talk about in your profession are not our profession. So sometimes it can be overwhelming to listen to. Does anybody ever say that?
Well, I hear that all the time. Yeah. I do. And sometimes a subject like economics can feel far away, like inaccessible. What does this mean to me? And to me, economics is absolutely everywhere. It's in this podcast. It's in the hotel that we're in, it's in the road that we pass, it's in the decisions that we make. So I see it everywhere. And the other thing too is that it can have a really big impact on things, whether it is like where you're choosing to go on holidays this year, or whether it can be the cost of school books sending kids back to school, or whether it can be like the groceries that you buy in your shopping basket. To me, economics is everywhere. And it's what I absolutely love is bringing it then to life.
And that's why you're the Positive Economist. So for people who haven't listened to the previous episode, we'll link it in the show notes. But why are you the Positive Economist? How did you get that name?
Well, that actually goes back to something that happened a long time ago. And one thing I would say to your listeners today is that it's very hard to talk about how you're different because you just feel this way. Like when I look at the Dig podcast, I think one of the things that I really like about it is the fact that you really bring you. And the questions that you ask aren't something that you've Googled before. It's questions that you really, really want to bring to the fore. The second thing is you're very, very in tune with your listeners. And I watched particularly the reaction to the last one, the messages that people were sending me about why they love it. And partly it's that. It's because they feel they've gotten to know you and your questions are there. But also as well, another thing that I really like about it is I remember you did an Instagram story It was about 3 or 4 days after the podcast had dropped the last time. And you were out for a walk and you said, do you know what I was just thinking about? Had the chat with Susan last week, and it comes across like you're talking to people directly. You're not talking to the hundreds of thousands of people that watch this, but instead that person themselves. And the reason that I'm saying all this to you is that you probably do all of that and don't even know that you do it, because that's just you. And it's similarly, and this is why I'm going back to my name about the Positive Economist. I didn't know that I was positive in the first place. I just thought everybody was. So what happened was that I was on a radio interview, and I was doing it every week, and it was during the crash, and things like, all the economic indicators that people like me talk about, like GDP and employment, all go in the wrong direction, Caroline, all go in the wrong direction. But I always found a way to find an opportunity in there, no matter what, whether it was a new support that was out or some industry that was rising or something. And so Gareth O'Callaghan, his producer, used to write the introduction for me every week. And one week she called me a recessionista, and then the next week I was called a Positive Economist. So I went back to my husband after that, and I said to him, Gareth O'Callaghan called me the Positive Economist today as we were starting off the show, and he said, sure, that's the ideal name for you. Why don't you secure the domain name and start writing a blog under it? And that was it. So I didn't I didn't sit down with a brand specialist or anything. This was
just
simply
with Gareth.
and I would say that absolutely. But I would say that to anybody is pay great attention to the way in which people describe you, introduce you, network with you. Like if you're at a networking event, someone says, "Oh, this is Caroline. Do you not know she runs?" Listen hard to what they say, the way they describe you, because everybody has a spreadsheet in their head, and beside your name, they have got like 2 or 3 words or a description, and that's it. That's your USP.
What about, so if we go straight in,
Yep.
What the hell's happening in the economy right now? It can be so uncertain for everybody, business owners especially. That uncertainty is there. What's going on? Can you give us any inside overview? Because you couldn't dive deep, but tell us what's going on.
Caroline, I'm always intrigued by when people talk about uncertainty in the economy today as if it's a relatively new thing, because a couple of years ago we had COVID and we said the same. Like a few years before that we had Brexit, we said the same. A few years before that we had the great financial crash, we said the same. And I mean, a couple of years ago we had really, really high inflation, we said the same. As long as I have been out of college, in fact, even when I was in college, it has been a lot of, we don't know what's going to happen. And I think, and you're the same, you do it all the time, is that sense of still needing to make decisions, operationalizing or executing your plan today, like you're talking about there, like your real passion being around the podcast. You're still out there looking for people who want to really avail of the value that you can bring them. You're implementing, and you do so well, the way you execute the social media plan all along the way, is that you can't stop all the time and think about, geez, I must just check the paper now to see, what's happening in the White House or what new regulation is happening across the border or anything else like that. So when it comes to the economy, it is a really, really interesting time for sure. I don't know when it won't be. And they say that curse, may you live in interesting times. I've always lived in interesting times. But I think there needs to be a separation between the economy and business, which is at the end of the day, some things never go out of fashion, like delivering value for money, building relationships, following up consistently, doing what you say you're going to do, figuring out ways that you can be new and innovative. Like, for example, the way in which you bring, say, a podcasting style to conferences, the way in which you enable companies to upskill and not just upskill, but really strategize around digital marketing. That's the type of thing where you're at the coalface of, here's what a company does really, really well, and here's how you can help them do it better and promote it to a newer audience, maybe in ways they might be unfamiliar with. Now, no matter what tariffs are going on, or what sort of, as I say, regulation, or what's happening with figures like GDP and so on, you still need to do that on a daily basis. So first of all, I would say the economy is really interesting, but what happens on the ground in business often is, relatively speaking, independent of it. That said, what I think is going on in the world is we're seeing a shifting in things that we thought were always going to be there. We always thought that the US, for example, was going to have very strong relationships with, for example, the EU and Canada and so on. That certainly, that has been challenged. We probably always thought that inflation was going to be created by things like the cost of business going up, not by a government putting tariffs on things, and therefore, and ultimately what a tariff is that if I buy something in from abroad, I have to pay for that. I have to pay more for that. So that's a tax on a domestic economy. We didn't think we would see that. We also thought that communications coming out from somewhere like the White House would come through press releases and PR teams and so on like that, not on, where the time that the world is hearing about it is the same time that the people closest to the president is hearing about it. That's what I mean by, in terms of that the status quo is certainly changing. But what I would also say as well is that I think more and more as time has gone on, and you know, I'm now 15 years in business, is that the entrepreneurial ecosystem supported by governments has gotten better and better. And not everyone would agree with me on that. And I can understand why if they haven't interfaced with it, but I have. And what I mean by that is, like, I remember, say, let's just take in the South, when Enterprise Ireland or the local enterprise offices could only work with, or could provide financial assistance to companies that were in internationally traded services and manufacturing. That's now totally changed to where every business can get lean, green, digital and export supports. When I look at the North, I see something like Intertrade Ireland that is enabling businesses to really transact between North and South. When I look at the EU, and I'm looking at an awful lot more organisations now like Enterprise Europe Network. So that's where economics interfaces directly with businesses, is that it needs to help businesses grow and develop and expand and export and all of that support, so that sort of thing. And it's not just a certain sector or a certain niche anymore. So out of the challenges that we see, and I'm going back to being the positive economist here, is that I think when governments had to step up and help out during COVID, governments had to step up and help out businesses be able to build an e-commerce and so on like that. Of economic challenges that are presented to governments actually present opportunities for businesses to help a government help them engage with the entrepreneurial ecosystem.
Okay, yes. And when I strip it back in my head, when you're saying that, I'm like, businesses can get so consumed by the negativity and the noise, and they think that it's affecting their business when actually it hasn't affected their business yet. And they could be just keeping going with all the passion they started with. Don't let that noise stop you from doing what you know you're good at.
Well, I mean, that's it, because, you know, when we hear, for example, I'll give you a case in point, 89,000 jobs were created in the South last year. And that then, of course, naturally enough, when that statistic comes out, then people are saying, well, you know, are we going to be facing a labour shortage? And what are we doing about the pipeline of talent? And is there enough STEM graduates and so on? But like, in reality, there's lots of people who are listening to you today who maybe they have like 10 customers, 50 customers, they have 100 customers. That's all they need.
Yeah.
So whatever is happening with tens and thousands and millions and billions and trillions, all of that can be going on out there, but simply focus on what you've got in front of you. And this is, on the other hand, then, instead of focusing on the macroeconomics, focusing on the microeconomics, like, how do I increase my profit? How do I reduce my cost base? How do I make things more efficient? How do I embrace AI to make my operations more efficient? How do I get time back for me? Where do I get the time to think? Like, that's actually where real economics comes to life on an individual, business to business, household to household basis.
I love that. Okay, that's going to really help ground us here in this conversation, because the outside noise does nothing but depress me sometimes. I'm watching the news and I'm like, oh, I'm screwed here. Like, there's no point in keeping going. And you would feel like it could get overwhelming.
But you see, Caroline, this is where I now listen far more to that than I used to before, because now I'm part of the news. Like, I'm that.
Sorry, I don't mean you.
Oh, no, don't worry. Don't worry at all.
The news at 6 o'clock that's blaring on the TV. I'm like, oh my God, what is happening out there? What are they saying about tariffs, Jared? What does that mean? I Jared's like, oh, we're frigged.
Yeah.
So and I'm like, oh God. So that negative mindset and talk that scares us can sometimes really affect how you then pick yourself up the next day.
And that's where I really want taking stock at Newstalk to be different, is that when you listen to it, is that you think, right, how does this apply to me?
Yes.
And how can I take this and really see it for what it is? Because like I'm mentioning, with all of the uncertainty that is happening, governments are now saying, how do we take care of our entrepreneurial ecosystems? And they can do that, Caroline, but unless you engage with them, you won't see the benefit of that. So the challenges that you're seeing presented at 6 o'clock offer opportunities for you, but you have to be willing to go after them and find them. And that's now where I see my role being part of the national media to help people with that.
Unreal that they have you.
Thank you.
We need.
Thank you. Long may continue.
I swear to God, I was delighted, because, as you say, you can turn it around as an opportunity for us. And sometimes we need that, because we're so busy in our businesses. We need someone to say, actually, this could be good for you. So this is why you're great. This is right. Okay, let's go. So I don't want to go into like negativity straight away, but what would you see? Let's start with the overall. A big mistake that you see when it comes to finance and businesses. What's the big thing people are doing wrong and you're like, don't do that, like a mistake?
Yeah, I think when people look and think about finances as bookkeeping, grey, boring, like the way, to me, finances are, if I strip it back a bit more, is metrics, let's say. To me, financial indicators about your business are the same as signposts for me guiding me up here today. They help you figure out if you're on the right path. And I think not taking note of them and not being excited about them and not automating them is a big mistake, because you mentioned there everyone's busy, and they are. There's no doubt about it. Like, no matter who you talk to or where, people are always saying, God, I'd love more time, and I should be doing this, should be doing that. And God, I know I should be automating, and all of that sort of thing. But how do you know if all of the time and effort that you're putting into what you're doing is actually getting you closer to where you need to go? And your numbers are really, really good at giving you that, because I might deal with a really interesting client and a really interesting piece of work, but if it's not profitable, Caroline, it can run into trouble. Another thing is that I might say, look, I'm just getting up and running now, and I'm going to put an awful lot of time into this client. And look, I won't charge for that hour and that hour and that hour and that hour. And then you train the client to expect that time basically for free, because they're expecting you to be charging them for something that is worthwhile to you. It's not their job to say, Caroline, you're making enough out of this now. They're not going to do that.
No.
So, and that's what I mean by simply setting up the signposts in the first place, to actually think about, okay, what are the things that matter? And there doesn't have to be that many, but missing that is a big mistake, because you can pour so much time and effort and energy. And it's like me driving in the wrong direction, and then suddenly I'm in Galway and I'm at the total other end of the country of where you would expect me to be. And what's worse, Caroline, is if I blamed you for it.
Over the years, the Dig podcast has grown so much, and that's because you've been subscribing to our channel, following on Apple and Spotify. So I suppose if you haven't done that and you're listening and you love our content, if you could follow on Apple or Spotify, or hit that subscribe button on YouTube, it means that we're going to be able to keep doing this, that I can keep bringing the team along with me, have great guests like you've been hearing, and it just means a lot to us. So that's just my little ask for you today. And now we're back to the podcast. What do you mean? Tell me, like, turn that into business. In what way would you be doing?
Is that I have to put in all this time and effort into my clients, and now my clients aren't paying me enough, and this is awful. And at the end of the day, it was because maybe it was that you weren't, maybe the charging mechanism wasn't right. Maybe it was that you were charged a fixed fee and it should have been time and materials. Maybe it was that you added in a whole load more value, never told the customer, and then they kind of said, oh yeah, listen, that's grand, sure, yeah, that's handy now, but what I really wanted was over there. That's what I mean by blaming the other person from it. That is like, to go back to my analogy of me ending up in Galway, is that if I used the wrong signposts, or if I simply ignore them altogether and said, oh, I'm here, Caroline, and I'm here an hour early, and you said, yeah, but you're in the wrong location, this isn't where I needed you to be, and then I blame you because I'm like, well, why didn't she tell me that I should have been looking at these things all along? That's the point, is it's your responsibility to make money. It is. And there's plenty of ways of doing it, and your client is being led by you, so it's important to lead them.
Right, tell us how you know. So those signposts, those top level things we need, that business owners should be doing to look and see those signposts. What do you mean?
Well, okay, at a what we call unit economics level, first of all, the most basic thing that I think anybody should look at is the profitability of their product or service. So I'm going to, let's say, take the sponsorship of this podcast as a case in point. Like, what I would understand that if I was looking at the gross profit of, let's say, a sponsorship for this, I would say, right, that there's a lot of costs involved. Like, there's the production, there's your research and everything else to actually make it in the first place. So your gross profit would be, let's say, the revenue of the sponsorship, take away all of the work that's involved in actually creating it. And then, let's say, after that, then you're left with the gross profit. So I would first of all ask everybody to make sure and think about everything that's involved in making the thing in the first place, including the packaging for your product, including the fees to process your invoices, let's say, through if you work on e-commerce, for all of that. But then after that, because I having been on the receiving end of this, one of the few people that has, and I'm really delighted with that, the fact that you've had me back, so I can give you the feedback of what it's like afterwards. Mm-hmm. But like, to see the amount of work that you put into marketing it, mm-hmm. and all of the, and it's not just the social media, it's also responding to the social media as well. And then separately to all of that, you have the cost of your accountant, you have the cost of the people who are administering what's happening on the side. You have got the taxes involved. So if you take away all of those costs, then you're left with your net profit. And at a fundamental level, everybody should make sure that the thing that you're actually selling in the first place is profitable at the most basic level. And I'm sure there are people listening today who'll say, surely that's happening. I'll give you two hidden costs. First of all, your own time. And the reason that that's a hidden cost, particularly if you work on your own, is that if you were to actually charge your own time to your business at a market rate, I'm going to take a round figure, £50 an hour. Would you actually be still having a profit after that? Because a lot of people say, well, no, but sure, I'm only getting started or this or that. And that's grand. But at a point in time comes when you will have to pay somebody else and they won't work for nothing. So that's what I mean for a start. And the second thing is marketing. A lot of people forget that there's a cost involved in sending out the newsletter, in going to networking events and following up and sending proposals and so on like that. So when I say to look at the cost of your product or service to make sure that you have a gross and a net profit, that's what I mean is pretend that you were going to pay everybody else to do everything that you do. And now let's see.
Okay.
And that can be very revealing, because if you want to have staff, that is what will happen. And if you want to sell your business, that is what will happen. And that's a big mistake if you don't take that opportunity.
Let's let that sink in.
Is there a note to self there?
For me and everyone that's listening, because I'm sure there's a lot of people listening have been brought up with the mindset of you work, and you never really valued your time as that work. That was just, as long as you're getting your wages, and that's my wages covered, but it's not about your wages, it's about the profit you're shouting out there to me. Like, your wages are what you could pay someone else, but then what about what's left over? Is that what you're saying? That's the profit?
Two things I'm saying. One is that's your wages, and often people like you and me really like what we do, and so therefore you can often say, but sure, I'd be doing it anyway, or sure, I'd be doing nothing in the evenings now, and that's grand. But if you go on and you pay staff in the future, it's basically a discipline to prepare you to, the discipline around cost is what I mean, is to prepare you to be able to have the cost then ready to fund somebody else's wages. But the second thing is in terms of profit. First of all, Caroline, profit is a good thing. And I need to call that out, because sometimes we don't necessarily think that's the case. And I just like to put forward an idea about profitability that might change people's mindset, who instantly they get this feeling that someone think, I don't want to be making too much money or anything else like that, and I don't like profit and all that sort of thing. Is profit equals,
people say that? Do people actually say
people
that?
Do.
Well, I would love to meet
yes.
them. Right, okay.
Profit equals sustainability. And I often think about, like, when I think about the businesses that we have and the services that we provide, is that unless they are sustainable, then we can't do them anymore. And it would be an awful thing if I robbed our clients of the ability to engage with the things that we do and what they find valuable if we simply didn't price it properly. It would be awful, because then, again, I'm back to my signpost lead me in the wrong direction, is that I now, 15 years in, I now have responsibility to make sure that the company is sustainable and that it can grow. And if I don't make sure that the costs are managed well, well, then I can free myself up to have the thinking time and to go and to do other things and make it better and all that sort of thing, unless that discipline is there to be able to fund other people's wages. And profit equals sustainability, because sometimes things can go unexpectedly, right or wrong, and where you need to have a buffer to invest in new things, or where you need to have, the cushion to be able to handle things. So profit is a good thing, because it helps you to be able to sustainably look after your clients in the future and yourself. And also, there's nothing more draining of joy of a very, very strained bank account. So therefore, I would say there's a lot of good things with number one, thinking commercially, and secondly, from the perspective of thinking about managing your money as a discipline. And also thirdly, is that your numbers will give you signposts to see whether you're on the right track.
Can we do this back to basics with pen and paper? Is there anything particular program that is good? Is this using your software that you use for managing your books? What do you say to do?
Yeah, I think an investment in an accounting software is very, very useful. All right. Now, the one that we use, like, we only pay about €20 a month for it. So sometimes people think, oh God, that's another system, that's another thing. And it's important to just call out, like, how much money is involved. So we pay around about €20 a month. And so it highlights to me, like, what the profit is per product. So I don't have to be doing this on a daily, weekly basis. I have a dashboard set up with all the signposts, and therefore I can go and I can open up my phone right now and I can see if things aren't right somewhere. So a couple of dashboards that we have. One is, like I was saying, profit per product, but another one, now we're in a business to business. So just to explain to people what that is that a lot of our customers are businesses, as opposed to, let's say, if I was running a coffee shop, that I would call that a business to consumer business.
Yes.
So it's not that we would have like 1,000 people a day on our website buying something, or 100 people a day coming into our cafe. We have a business to business. So I look at the profitability per client as well, because what can happen is customer service creep. Is that if they, and it can happen inadvertently, oh, we just need this, or could you send us on a report for that, or it'd be really helpful if we had another call, and then that can kind of go on and on. So I keep a very close eye on that to make sure, again, that relationship is sustainable for both of us. And I also then look at cash flow as well. I look at like what is expected to come in and when, and the timing of that is very, very important. And one other, like, I could keep going here now, but I will say,
keep going.
There's two more in particular. I look at as well sales year over year on a cumulative basis. So what that means is I look at like where the sales were by this time last year, and I compare it to where the sales are this time this year. And the reason for that is that I can see if there's something missing. If something happened last year that isn't happening this year, maybe that's because we didn't follow up. Maybe that's because something has changed. And then on the other hand, I can look at what new sales we have this year and thinking, okay, do we need to dig, if you'll excuse the pun, do we need to dig a bit more into that? Is there a way in which we can expand to that? Because, so what it's like is a financial diary, your sales to date so far. It shows you what you were selling last year in comparison to this year. So I find that one as well is very, very helpful. And then the last one is, it's more on the marketing side, is I also look at our pipeline. I always keep an eye on that as well to see where we're at in terms of what's coming in. What are we proposing on? And Caroline, I always ask, if we don't get something, a tender, an award, an application, I'll always go back and ask why. And sometimes that has actually turned the decision because I had the interest to do it. A lot of people don't. But secondly, that is real market research. If somebody says, like, let's say you were to propose somebody to sponsor this podcast, I would be going back and saying, and they say no, which of course they shouldn't, but I would then, I'd be going back and saying why, like, was it the value, was it the audience? Because maybe what the reason they didn't go along with it is actually something that you do, but you thought everybody else knew, or something else like that. So they're the dashboards. It's the profit per product, the profit per client in a B2B basis. Look at cash flow. I also look at the marketing pipeline, and then also the sales cumulatively year over year, and then also like what we're owed and what we owe. That's it.
Do you think that a lot of people are not doing this?
Oh God, I would, yeah. Yeah, and it takes very little time to set that up. Like, it really does. The thing is that I'd say there's a lot of people paying a lot more than €20 a month for their accounting package and
not utilising it.
Not at all. No. And yet they might pay a highly paid consultant or a highly paid accountant to tell them that at the end of the year, as opposed to seeing it in real time, which is where it is often highlighted to me, we need, like, let's say if a sale didn't come in this year that did last year, what do we need to do about that? Right. And that becomes an easy thing to do when it comes to looking at cash flow, when it comes to looking at terms like that. Like, everything I'm describing can be accessible really quickly. There's no additional work after I set that up. And then it acts like a highly paid consultant saying, Susan, now keep an eye on this.
Right, so a piece of action after listening to that could be for people listening to maybe spend a half a day, a few hours looking at that software, how it works. But lots of people wouldn't even know what kind of reports it creates.
Exactly. So where I would say is take 15 minutes a day for a week. Where you go on to and look at the video tutorials provided by your accounting software, because you don't know what you don't know. And that's what I did. So every year I'll go in and I'll go on YouTube and I will find tutorials or the company's own software itself. And I'll find, because it's often, particularly now with AI, Caroline, a lot of them are now coming up with new functionalities. And of course we get an email, oh, look at our new da-da-da, and we're busy and we don't ever look at that.
Yeah.
So instead, because rather than say, right, we'll try and find half a day, very hard to find that in a lot of businesses, but 15 minutes a day for a week could actually reveal to you. Like, I looked at an hour-long video one day on our software, and that led me to set up all sorts of things. That has been really, really helpful. So that's all it takes. So look at the company's own video tutorials, 15 minutes a day for a week, and that'll bring you a long way.
Okay, write that down. If you're out running, keep it in your mental notebook. That's one piece of action you can take today from that. That's definitely something I'm going to do. Like, I need to watch that tutorial and how to create that report that shows me all the things you're saying. It's so funny. Before we went on, oh my God, we've so much to talk about. But anyway, sometimes I don't even look at these cards. Sign of a good guest. Before we came online, I said to you that Mary and I, who work together, Mary will say to me, I'd say on a weekly basis, what would Susan Hayes Culleton say? That she uses your three names. And that was talking about in relation to follow up. Like, we, in this industry, in lots of industries, you get lots of not right now, not right for us, and all of that. And we always go back because of you and say, can we just ask why?
Yeah.
Have you any feedback? That's been instrumental for us in creating new packages that work. So thank you for that advice, and you touched on it there. So anybody that's not doing that, don't be afraid of feedback, is really what feedback stage.
Oh yes, because we talk about market research and we often talk about that in terms of like focus groups or potential customers. But when you go, and like you do, when you go and you say, will you sponsor this podcast because it's going to be going out to a business audience, it's going to reach X amount of people, it's very high end production, we're going to make sure that there's an end to end social media journey, and this is the results based on what other people have said in the past, and these are the types of guests that we have. Like when you really put that out to somebody and then you're asking them to pay whatever it is to pay and they say no, that's the most valuable type of market research feedback that there is.
I know.
So, and it's really leaving extraordinary intel on the table because like I say, Caroline, it could be that they didn't know that there's Dig Mama as well as the Dig for Business side. And maybe it is, they say, well, actually, no, now we're actually more a business to consumer type business. But if you don't ask that question, then you can't say, well, hang on a second now. There's this as well.
Yeah.
So I find it extraordinarily useful. And then also sometimes when I've had those conversations, I would go back and say, but does our website convey what I'm conveying in a proposal? Because again, how often do people update their websites? It's probably, we should do that now someday. So it's a real life cycle of market research feedback. So, and it also dramatically depersonalizes rejection. Because again, when you run your own show, it can often be the case that you think, oh God, they rejected me and what I was offering. So when it comes down to, when you understand that it was availability, it was not the right fit, it was a different channel. When you actually hear what it is, it's not like, no, Susan, you weren't good enough, because that's what the internal voice can say. And then that can really knock your confidence. Is it depersonalize it to, okay, it actually wasn't a good fit for us for this reason, and maybe it is, we need to follow up in 3 months' time, and then the date goes in the diary and away we go.
Unreal advice. And actually listen to interview that Oprah was doing. She talked about ego, and your ego can come into play when you get the rejection where your ego's hurt, but it's actually all about business and it didn't suit them for those reasons, but you don't know if you don't ask. So it's unbelievable advice. That's another thing to do. Ask for feedback if you've had those kind of no's at this time. Why did they say that? So loads of businesses then they're talking about, so maybe there's different elements of what people come to you with and what people would say to me and mentoring and stuff, but loads of businesses are talking about scaling up and they're at a certain part but they're ready to scale. So like, what would you say to businesses who want to start scaling? Where should they start? Because it can be a very daunting process, and once you start, you're on that journey, right? So what would you say to businesses?
I think it all starts with the business model. I think it's like, if I was to, I'll just throw this question out to you now and we'll just see how you respond to me. So if I look at all of the different business lines that you have, of which there's many, and I don't know if your listeners know all of them. I don't know if I know all of them.
I don't know if I know all of them. So I know what you're saying. Yes, loads of different strings.
Okay, but if I was to say to you then, Caroline, which of your business lines could be most conducive to an immediate doubling of sales, which one would it be?
I would say the training element of what I do with businesses. So going out and working with businesses of all levels on how to become more visible online. I would say that's the scalability-ish, like, possibilities there.
But if people then are worried about, but I want you, Caroline, I want you to come, and there's only so many days in the calendar year. If I was to book you for 10 days or for 10 sessions or things like that, is there a worry that then there could be a limit on your capacity?
Absolutely. Yes.
So so you're making me really think then that's not scalable. Is that what you're saying? It sounds like there's a lot of capacity, but how do you build in scale? So is it that you then come up with the
online courses?
Possibly that, or is it that it is a specific model a proprietary model that you create, then facilitators can roll out like a franchise? Is that how you might do it?
Okay.
Or alternatively, is it that it could be an ecosystem that you build instead? I saw a great guy in America do this where he created the principles and all around that particular training and mentoring, but then brought people into, he created an ecosystem where maybe some people want, 1 day's mentoring, maybe some people want a whole strategic review. Is that he designed a system where you could come in and take what you needed out of that, but there was people who cascaded it the whole way down, and it was really, really strategic. So that's often where it comes back to, is when it comes to scalability, is that at what stage, I asked that question, and it's a blunt instrument, but it clarifies the thinking. If I came to you right now and doubled the amount of demand that you currently have, how could you handle it? And that's the first and foremost place that you need to think of when it comes to scale. So on the other hand, let's just say that you had a sponsor who wanted to come and say, I want 3 different...
This is great. This is like my own business mentor, and apologies for anybody who's thinking, oh my God, but this is great. Maybe people give people insights, turn it into their business, but thank you for doing this. So go on ahead, keep going.
So if it was the case, let's say that somebody said, I want to sponsor 2 series, or I want to sponsor a series focused on business growth and a series focused on business sustainability, let's say. Similarly, the question comes back, and I know sometimes people say, God, I'd love that problem. Would you? Because if you did actually have something that doubled, would you have the capacity? And also what I would say as well is the way in which to really enable yourself to have that is to deepen the foundation. Like, do you have the foundation for that? So when it comes to scalability, first things first is business model. How do you build something where if it doubled, if it quadrupled, if it whatever the word is after that, how do you handle it?
Yeah.
How do you handle it? So if you've got an online business, for example, and we'll go back to that point of, let's say you've got online training. Let's just say you create online training and then you sell it on a course by course basis.
Yes.
But if there was 1,000 users took that at the same time, what sort of opportunities might that pose? Okay, great for revenue and so on like that. But what challenges? Well, what if 500 of them sent in a query after that said, how do I change my password? Well, then you think, okay, but if I set up an automatic way that they could reset their own password, I could solve that problem. And that's the way you need to think. So scalability is the business model able to grow? Let's say if you were to double your revenue, would it also double your costs, or could you even do it at all? If the answer is it would double your costs or you couldn't do it at all, then it's not scalable. Yeah. But then that's fine, Caroline. Then you simply go and talk to somebody about how to change the business model to make it that way. Like, you can do it if you want.
I know. And there's people, like, there's a lot of business to consumer people listening to the podcast, and I used to be that, in that I used to have a shop, and I had always toyed with an idea of opening another shop at another town, and it was a great man in retail said to me at that time, you know, one good shop is better than 2 okay ones that pulls the other one down, and then you're stretched because you're running between the 2 and you want to scale, but you're actually doing damage to something that's, you know, there's so much to think about when you want to scale, right?
There is.
And I decided not to then. Plus, in relation to family as well, when you want to scale, it has such an impact across the whole. Like, I was talking about this with somebody yesterday, and she was saying, like, you could be doing this and you could be doing that. And I was like, well, I mean, I'd be away from the children all the time and all. So scalability has so much impact across everything, hasn't it?
Well, it just depends on what it means to you.
I know.
And that's why deepening the foundation is, like, if I was going to have 2 shops, well, then I probably would need a manager in both of them who take care of them. And therefore, and is that what you want? So we talk about scale, and we can often glamorize scale. We can, but there's a lot of knock-on effects there, and particularly when you have to support the users or the clients or whoever else it might be along the way. So, and the other thing I would say, and in fairness, you do this all the time anyway, is talk to people who have done it. Yes. Like, the Chinese have a great saying, which is, if you want to know the road ahead, ask those coming back. And more, and I'm seeing this as well, particularly in the north. More and more, there's more conferences now, there's more occasions, and you and I are often at them, we're often emceeing them, we're meeting the people, we're interviewing the people there. Like, there's more and more people now being more and more visible about the journey that they've had, whether it's raising money, selling, succession, scaling.
Failures.
So you can certainly go and talk to people and ask them, like, what happened that you didn't expect and how did you handle it? But for my scale 101 challenge is the business model. Can it handle, how much growth can it handle, and can you handle it with it? Such
good advice, because sometimes you glamorise it, as you say, but there's a lot to think about, and thank you for using mine as a case study. It's given me lots to think about. But when you do, I suppose, when you're thinking about scalability, or you're thinking about scaling back, or you're thinking about anything to do with your business, it's all about the cash, right? The cash flow.
Yep. Yes.
The horrendous thing that really, especially when I came from my background in retail, oh my God, all the retailers listening, especially when your money's in your stock and there's no money in the till and you have 6 staff and the cash flow management in businesses, Susan, and apologies if this conversation has no real structure, but I'm just jumping from all the different things you're talking about here. I think it's the things people want to know. Any tips on practical ways to manage cash flow? Yeah, I know you have them because we talked about it in the last one, but give us an idea there. Okay, so first of all, I think having a cash flow statement is really important. And what that is, so we have one, and we look 12 months out. So now I know for retailers who might have lots and lots of, like, hundreds of transactions, this can sound daunting. So I'll tell you what I do, and then you can adapt it. So we basically look at what money we're expecting to come in and when, and the when is different. Like, that's different to profit, and I'll
distinguish the two in a moment, but it's looking at when is money coming in and when is money going out, and then looking to find the pinch point. So, for example, maybe around about Christmas, of course, retailers often have a great time around that, but when do you have to pay for the stock? And how far in advance, and what special offers can you get, when's cash and delivery and all that sort of thing. So all of that is baked into the pie. And here's where profitability and cash flow, it's important to not confuse them. So let's say that I'm going to sell something to you for 100 grand. And it's going to cost me 70 grand to deliver it. And that's net now. So there's actually 30 grand clear. That's grand, Caroline. But what if I have to pay the 70 grand 6 months before I get the 100 grand? And in the meantime, something could happen to the 100 in the first place. That's the difference between profit and cash flow. So profitability is often while it's very, very real, it's the timing of which money comes in and comes out is what can really affect things. So what I would say, first of all, is do a cash flow statement. And if you don't know where to start, just look at your last, let's say, 3 months of bank statements and extrapolate that forward. And I would, again, with certain tools, that cannot be automatically done, but it can even be worth it just for you to just think about like that. Like, for example, on a Friday, I typically make sure that all the payments are done. I quoted her the last time, but a neighbour at home always said, short accounts make long friends. And you know, she was a woman who worked in accounts herself in a business. And I always remember that because it's true. And so
say it again.
Short accounts make long friends. So if you can pay people quickly, it eliminates so many things. And so let's say, right, I generally would do that on a Friday. And then when it looks at like, okay, what needs to be paid, whether it's a VAT bill or whether it's the bigger ones, just figuring out the timing of things can really matter. And there's nothing more anxiety reducing than doing a cash flow statement, in my opinion. The second thing is I have a couple of lines that I use a lot.
And that cash flow statement, is that a simple paper exercise as well?
I do it on a spreadsheet, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I just do it on a spreadsheet. So simply like looking at the balance of the bank account at the moment and then rolling forward, like this money is expected in on this date, that money is expected out on that date. And doing that up until the point at which you can see then when the balance in the bank would go down to zero. So how far away are you from here until there? Because that is basically your runway, is what they call it. And so you might say, right, well, we need to get 2 sponsors in between now, let's say, in the end of the year, or 10 sponsors in between now and the end of the year. And if we do that, well, then we need to book for equipment and recording and everything else. So then we would be paying that at such and such time. So that therefore, it just gives you a full map of money in and money out. Mm-hmm. And if there's going to be a pinch point, then you can say, right, do I need to shift some expenditure? Or how could I bring forward some money that's coming in? Do I need to get an overdraft? Do I need to extend an overdraft? And you're much better off asking for overdrafts and things like that long before you need them. Long before you need them.
I know. Okay, right. Okay, move on to the next point.
So I have a couple of lines. Yeah. This is one that people always come back to me on, that they like knowing, and that is, so let's say I invoice you on the 1st of July. I'll just pick a random date. And let's say there's 30 days credit on it. Well, if I don't invoice you until the 28th of July because I'm busy and that type of thing, I can't, Caroline, ring you 3 days later and say, will you send me in the money there? Because I said 30 days term. So first of all, it's really important to invoice promptly. It's the simplest thing you can do. People can't pay you unless you charge them. It's a very obvious thing to say. And then the second thing is how to enforce your credit terms and maintain relationships. So the line that I have for this is, dear Caroline, I'm following up on the invoice that we sent you 30 days ago. Could I kindly ask you the status of this invoice? And that's a lovely way of saying I'm enforcing the credit terms, but there's also it's a nice way, rather than saying, Caroline, where's the money?
Show me the money.
Show me the money. Exactly. So that line often takes I don't want to be, because I really get on with them and I want, it just puts it down to what's the status of the invoice. The point is clear. You're not asking that for nothing. And then the third thing I would say on cash flow, something my cousin taught me, Brian, a long time ago, and he saved me a fortune with it, is, let's say again, I'm going to buy this plant here, and I'm going to buy it on credit. Usually people expect that. Usually people assume in 30 days. But if I was to say, and Caroline, if I was to buy this from you, what would the price be if I was to pay you on the day of delivery? And often I've asked that, Caroline, and often got a discount.
Really?
Well, yeah, because I can pay on the day.
Would you say it in those words?
So if you'd say, okay, well, if we're going to do X, Y, and Z for you now, and the price, let's say, is, I'm going to say 5,000, and I'd say, okay, and that's on a 30-day invoice. Yep, okay. So if we were to pay on the day that we received the invoice, what would the price be? And now I never use the term discount. I just say, what would the price be?
Yes.
That's it.
Right.
And after it would be such and such. Or also if I was negotiating on something where I felt, right, look, this is above the budget, right? So our budget is $5,000 for this and yours is 5.5. And I would say, okay, so I see that it's 5.5. So if we were to pay on the day of the invoice, could you do it for 5?
Okay.
And I've often got a yeah. So Brian taught me, like, you can negotiate on your cash flow. You don't have to negotiate on price, just negotiate on the fact that you have the cash to pay for things quickly. They say cash is king, so let it be.
Love it. Okay. I would never have thought of doing that, but that's definitely a situation I'm sure lots of people, including myself, will come into play where, yes, okay. Right.
I love the way all of these are sinking in because you're applying the note to self as you go.
I'm like, I need to take a notebook after this and re-listen to it. But it's all them wee things that we're afraid to talk about money. And that was the thing that I was going to move on to later is, you know, businesses feel they shouldn't talk about money. Like never say how much you're making, never say how much you're not making, and just don't talk about money. And then it leads to the whole money mindset of being afraid of money, being worried about money. And it's just also just don't want to talk about it. And that's not healthy either in business.
Like, you can keep your business to yourself. You can, like, you don't have to say, hi, I'm Susan and I make X amount. But I think it's a very healthy thing to, you know, to have a healthy attitude to how do I optimize margin? How do I manage cost? How do I make things more efficient? How are you making things more efficient? Or, you know, there's a lot of talk at the moment around AI. Caroline, and I know that's a topic that's a subject of your podcast as well. Whereas, you know, it's important to also maybe ask the question, like, what are you doing with AI that's genuinely making a difference to the bottom line, for example? That's a very healthy question to ask of somebody and to share as well, reciprocally as well. Yeah. So I think, you know, fair enough, I get people want to be private about things and that's grand and that's fine. But I think talking about money in a way that is in a learning or in a knowledge sharing or in a how do I optimize what I'm doing and can I learn from other people, that can be very healthy.
Unreal.
And also as well, like you can talk to, let's say I go to somebody about marketing, or let's say I was to talk to you about saying, right, I want to raise the digital profile of the company. Like, it's, while I don't have to necessarily say, and here's how much we earn and here's how much we pay on this, but to say, but Caroline, how can I optimize what we're doing so that it will make a difference to my bottom line? Having that conversation with non-financial suppliers helps you with back to those signposts again. So there's a lot to be said for managing that healthy. But I will also go back to the point that it's good to make a profit. Like, it's okay to make a profit. It's good. So, and using the language of we're a profit-making company, or we want to grow our profit because we want to become more sustainable, or we want to make sure that we're here for a very long time, that can often neutralise that sort of negativity around it as well.
Absolutely. And just when you said that word sustainable, and that sustainability word is floating around a lot out there, so important, yes, but that can scare the life out of businesses too, because it often comes with costs that they haven't, and they're like afraid. They're like, oh, what does this mean for us? We want to do it, but we don't have the money. What about sustainability? Talk to us about that. Yeah,
I think sustainability is often connotated with cost, I would say. And right, I would say that if you can, and we're talking about sustainability now in a different context.
Yes, of course. Sorry, sustainability and things businesses can be doing to become more sustainable, more green, more eco-friendly, all that type of
that, and also socially sustainable as well. Whether it could be diversity and inclusion or different things like that. I think it's a real unique selling point to businesses who can do that well. I think, you know, companies who can say this is going to help you become more carbon neutral, or, you know, we use recycled packaging, or we donate X amount to a certain charity, or we have a particular focus around shopping local, or our supply chain is primarily of businesses that are more sustainable or something. Anything else like that, I think that can give a business a really unique selling point. And if you're struggling for how do we differentiate ourselves, that's one way of doing it. Secondly, I think if you can, now we're a service-based business, so our carbon footprint is extremely low. And I've really looked into this bit to see if there's a way in which we could lower it. But it's like we're in a co-working space, for example. A lot of our staff work from home. So, and we don't make a thing that we sell, and therefore there's not packaging and so on. So when it comes to businesses who do, though, often reducing your carbon footprint can come with reduced costs. And there's a lot of business supports that can help that, whether it's the Green for Business support that the local enterprise office offers. For example, Enterprise Europe Network offers they have an E and energy support. There's a lot of supports now in the entrepreneurial ecosystem to help companies with that. And then the other thing, here's a simple thing that I do, and I don't do it for any other reason than the intention, and that is that in every proposal we send out now, we highlight the sustainable development goals that will help the client strive towards. Like, let's just say in this case, this podcast helps people towards decent work. It helps around innovation. I don't know what the gender split necessarily is of your audience, but I'm guessing you would have quite a significant female listenership.
By 70-30.
Right. So therefore you're helping gender equality, particularly around areas maybe that are less discussed in that environment. So when it comes to sending our proposals, I now highlight to companies, here's how we can help you become more sustainable as well. It's a simple thing to do. It's on every one of our proposals now. And I got help with all of that because I applied for that Green for Business support because I didn't know what I didn't know. I keep saying that. And so therefore, rather than think, oh, extra work, extra cost, extra this, actually, I would put it the other way to say lower cost, small efforts can go a very, very long way. And it is what people want. It can help you distinguish yourself with your own USP. It can be very, very positive. And I think, particularly in this part of the world, the focus on it will only grow.
Absolutely. And just a point, we just recognised last night the team were staying here in the Carrickdale, and outside every other, I suppose they've positioned them throughout the hotel, are water systems that you can take your jug out of your room and fill it up. And it's all around, well, what we've gathered from what they've written on the side of the thing and some messaging that is in the hotel, to reduce plastic, and it comes from a well that is local, and the lovely story behind that, the reducing the plastic, their efforts to do that didn't go unnoticed by us in the team, but businesses are starting to implement it, and people love that. And it builds that kind of, I suppose, that feeling in the hotel. So there's so many benefits to it if you can get your head around the why, the how, and the costs.
Yes, and not assume that they're high.
Yes.
That's the main thing here. Same with setting up the financial dashboard, is don't assume that it'll take forever. A lot of things can be done with a small period of time. And like when you particularly talk about the hospitality sector, like on say booking.com now or these aggregation or competition websites, now people are searching by a sustainable stay, for example. Like that's what I mean. It could be people are looking for this in the investment world. There's a big focus on environmental, social and governance investing. We could go on, but so it's there. So sustainability can be your USP, but like I say, the focus is likely to grow. So it's important to even get on board with the language, what people expect, what people want, and see it for what it is.
So true. And don't stick your head in the sand about that either, because that's, as you say, only going to become more apparent, more needed, more wanted from consumers. So if businesses can do anything at all to start to talk about that, to do it, don't be afraid, because when you do stick your head in the sand about these things, they don't go away. You just might go away. So yeah, oh my God, there's so much here. So and I'm like skipping back and forth. I feel like firing these away now. I'm like, these do not mean anything. I suppose I wanted to mention about, and we did talk about it the last time in the podcast, but for those people who are not going to go back and things have moved on as well, raising prices can be very difficult. And look, we're living in an economy, as you are always talking about, everything's changing. Things are going up. They're not really coming down. So we need to reflect that. What about that? Businesses are afraid to raise their prices. I hear it all the time.
Okay.
Oh, I can't charge. I can't, and I'm like that too. I'm like, oh, I can't really be charging anymore now. I charged them not the last time. Talk to me about that.
No, and sometimes you know that's the case, and sometimes a price might be at its limit. Now, there's certain environments, like say a cafe or a restaurant, that type of a business, where you can't charge like $5.50 for a coffee, and last week you were charging $4.50, and the cafe down the road is charging $4.60. There can be very, very small, sensitive movements there, and I get that. So I think first of all, without ever thinking about raising your prices, how can you make things more efficient? And particularly now, maybe it is with AI, or maybe it is by, as you say, like things move on, maybe subscriptions that you had you don't need anymore. So taking a look at your cost base in the first case, or making sure you're getting the most value out of that. That can be a way that it can be an antidote to having to increase them in the first place. So we'll start there. And then when it comes to I would say, first of all, pricing at all, Caroline, it's important to actually review your pricing I would say like once a year to actually, now I have a database of where for each product line for each of the businesses that I have, like just like I was saying earlier, what the gross profit per product is and what the net is. And I go back and I look at that to see how things might have changed. So it's important to not just assume things are static. And also then when people ask you what's the price of this, is that you can tell them and tell them quickly and making pricing decisions. Right. So now let's say you've reviewed your cost base, your prices need to go up. The next thing to do is to communicate them. So first of all, it is important that you have to be willing that sometimes if you do increase prices, customers will not buy from you. And is that okay? And if it's not okay, well then maybe you need to go back again and look at, is this sustainable to keep going at all, either with a certain product or with a certain business line? And then the next thing is, when it comes to saying, right, we're going to go ahead with this, we know we might lose 1 or 2% or 5% or whatever, what do we do? What I always do is that I communicate it long before it happens. So I would say I'm just thinking of the last round of price increases that we had. I went to our clients 6 months before and I said, look, we haven't raised them. I think that's important to say as well. They have been the same for the past 5 years or however long it would be. Haven't changed them in that period of time. Things have gotten more expensive, etc. Here's the additional value that we've been adding over that period of time. It's now time to increase them. But we really value your custom and I wanted to tell you in advance so you could factor in things on your side. And we'll be implementing this, let's just say, from the 1st of February onwards. And I have certainly sometimes got pushback on that. And sometimes the pushback is, look, can you leave it go until June? And I to see if that's possible. Sometimes it is, look, we can't continue with this. And I'd say, well, that's a pity and I understand that. And is there a way in which we can help you to offboard? Like, just because they don't pay, just because they don't go along with it doesn't mean that the relationship is over or over permanently. And then sometimes it is, yeah, okay. And then sometimes, like way back in my earlier days, I remember one client, I'm going right back to when I was just me and I had said, we're pushing the price, I'm going to say from 8 to 100, let's just say. And he said, oh, so you're getting a bit of sense now, are you? And the thing is, he said you were undercharging all along. And this is what I'm saying about going back to, it wasn't his job to say, by the way, you're not charging enough, here's another bit. Your client won't do that. And it's so annoying when that happens, Caroline, because basically we have this idea in economics called consumer surplus. And consumer surplus is this, let's say this here is worth 80 euros to me, but I see it's available for 50. So consumer surplus is, so I'm actually getting 30 euros off this because I was willing to pay 80. It's only costing me 50, so I get to keep 30. So his consumer surplus sure was, I don't know, whatever it was. And so he kind of said to me, oh yeah, no harm, all right. He says, about time you got a bit of sense. But sure, what customer is going to say, oh no, actually, no, I prefer to give you the 80 euros for that. I know you're only charging 50, but here's another bit of my hard-earned money. They don't. So
that was good feedback from him.
It was.
That was good confidence then for you to move forward.
Yeah.
Pricing as well.
Yeah, it was. It really was. All right. So, you just have to be, I think, like it has to be done scientifically. It can't just be or whatever. And there's 3 pricing models that are useful. One is costs plus. So let's say it cost me 10 and 10 and 10 and 10 to make this. So now I'm going to charge 60 and now I have 20 profit. That's cost plus, where I add up all the costs and add a margin. The second one is market research, which is, I'm thinking now, let's say in my speaking business, right, such and such an economic speaker might command that fee, an international economic speaker might charge that fee, and where do I fit in there? Because it's a different model. But one that few people use, and I think it's very important to remember that there is another one, which is simply to ask. So let's say you ask me to do, I'm going to say an event, you're going to ask me to MC an event. And then I would say, okay, so Caroline, and what's the budget that you've earmarked for this part? And let's just say.
But people don't like to tell you their budget. Do you ever find that?
Yeah.
When you ask that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Are we about to lead into that?
I am.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. I jumped in. I was like, I hope you're going to tell us how to handle those people.
And it was interesting. I had this conversation yesterday with somebody where I said that and I said, like, what's your budget? And he said, he who speaks first loses.
That's so true.
And I said, well, she is staying quiet.
Because you do, I've asked that
and
you don't get the answers.
So, well, first of all, you have to ask in order to figure out if you're going to get an answer in the first place. And I'll elaborate on that in a moment, but that's called demand-based costing. So this is where, let's just say they say, right, the budget is, I'm going to say 10 grand. And you might be thinking, okay, I was going to charge 5. Okay, if
you're afraid of you saying 10 then, is that what it is?
Sometimes it can be that, or sometimes that's the number that's down there. And by them going first, then it prevents you saying 13. Now, I've often, sometimes I've asked, I've said often and sometimes. Sometimes I've asked that question and the number has been lower than what I've anticipated. And then you need to manage that conversation there from that perspective. But the point I'm making is that sometimes we go in too early with saying, this is my price, because you're not allowing the market to tell you what their budget is. And this happens, for example, in weddings as well, where somebody might say like the budget is $5,000 for a wedding dress, or it could be, or whatever it might be, is if you don't let that answer be forthcoming, you won't know. So that's demand-based costing, is if the budget is X, how could you create an offering or a package that meets that? So going back to your point about sometimes they don't want to tell you, true, that certainly does happen. And that is then when you need to have your cost plus or your market research model, and saying, right, this is
the value.
This is the value. And I always start off with saying, right, so it's not just I'll be standing on the stage for the day, because you and I both know how much work goes into genuinely an event. I would say, right, well, for this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this, it will be that. So I have but I have that ready to go off the tip of my tongue. And again, if sometimes your prices will be too high for people, and sometimes that has to be okay. It has to be okay.
Yeah.
So because if you're accepting everything, or if your proposals are being accepted by everyone, the likelihood is you're leaving some consumer surplus there on the table.
Absolutely. A tough one to navigate, especially when you're dealing with lots of different people, loads of different budgets. Some are closed books and won't tell you.
Yeah.
And you really don't want to price yourself like where they can't afford it, because you might want to do the job. But as you say, what's the point in getting that job if it's actually not going to deliver the economics that you need for to make it work? So it's a tricky one, but one that we need to talk about more. That's good advice though on the different ways to handle those two situations. Definitely, I'm sure we all encounter both of those. So thank you for sharing that. Susan, I swear to God, I'm like, what time is it? I've got quick fire questions that I think are going to be very good for people.
Right.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. You're always ready. You're born ready. Born ready. What film's that out of? Born Ready. I was born ready. Was that Tom Cruise said that? Can you remember, Eamon? Being out production. Anyway, I'll Google it after. One money myth you'd love to bust.
That it is difficult to learn how to invest well. Learning how to invest, whether it comes from business investment or personal investment, can be very, very simple and straightforward. And I think it is a skill that everybody should learn. I stumbled across learning it myself when I was in college, actually. When I joined the Business Society, and a stock market training company came in to speak to us, and I learned an awful lot from that short encounter that led me down a very different career path as a result. But definitely, it's very simple to learn how to invest well. That is the myth that is the truth. For sure.
It's not something difficult. I have no clue about. That's something we need a podcast topic on, whether it's you could advise us on the person that can do that or whatever. But that is, I've heard it said so many times recently. Yeah, I was brought up with you keep your money in your bank if you don't give it away, if you have any at all. So love that, right? We need to do a podcast on that. A book that every business owner should read. I'm just saying, if you have time to read, or audio book, what one would you say? You told us a few in the last time.
I really like a book called Focus by a woman called Valerie Pierce. It really helps you to think clearly.
Okay.
It helps you to critically analyse. It helps you to reveal out of a no how the signpost towards a yes. It's a book that really is very, very helpful. And it's not necessarily a business book around like products and finance and so on like that, but it gives you a set of skills that are helpful in many, many interactions that you need in business. So Valerie Pierce, Pierce.
Okay, Focus.
That's spelling of Pierce.
Okay. One financial habit that changed your life.
I'm referring back to something I said earlier, but creating a dashboard of signposts in a business, because that habit. Like often when we think about habits, we think of things that are repeated, but actually it's the technology is doing the repeating. And then I can log in and I can see what's happening around the things that are important. So, and I suppose secondarily from that is I see shocking statistics about how much money is wasted in digital transformation. And a lot of the reason for that is that we go and we use a piece of technology for what we need, and that's all, as opposed to, like I was saying earlier, spending a bit of time on the webinars and the tutorials that the technology providers give you, so that then you can make the most of what you've got. And that can be enormously helpful. So they really tie together, but creating that dashboard of signposts was key.
Okay, that's definitely something that you're repeating again, so we definitely need to do. The worst piece of financial advice you've ever heard?
That Worst piece of financial advice
that you've ever heard anybody give anybody, and you're like,
yeah. Borrow today and it'll be grand tomorrow. I remember hearing that. It was during the time of the Celtic Tiger, and I remember hearing somebody say, I was in college and somebody else was thinking about going on a J1 to the States, and they said, like, just borrow the money, and sure, look, when you're working 4 or 5 grand, it won't matter when you're paying it back. Like, that year was probably around 2007, 2008, when jobs weren't necessarily forthcoming in the first place. That idea that, so I'll just flip it to what I would have much preferred, and that is that I think when it comes to borrowing, if the life of the loan is longer than the life of the asset, it just doesn't make sense. But if the life of the asset is longer than the life of the loan, it does. So, like, I have borrowed to buy, well, myself and my husband have borrowed to buy our house. That's called a mortgage. We'll have that house forever. It will all going well, we outlive it, obviously. The length of the life of the asset will be much longer than the loan. So I think a very bad piece of advice is, like, she'll borrow today and tomorrow it will take care of itself. It may not. And there's no need to walk into that blindly. There's no need for that.
It's a good way to look at it. Okay. So what's the first thing you do when you get your wages at the end of the month?
I put this on autopilot.
This mightn't be business related. I don't know what you're going to say, but what's the first thing you do?
Well, it's a bit like the signpost earlier. Is I put a lot of things on autopilot. Is the money goes into a pension? I put money into a pension every month before, and obviously that goes directly from the wages, so it doesn't even come out in the first place. So that's something like setting up a pension. The tax relief in this part of the world is really, really brilliant. It makes enormous financial and personal sense to do it, and it costs a lot less than people think. But it sounds like I'm circumventing your question, and I'm not. Often, Caroline, as well, we don't have to do anything with our money. Just leave it alone.
No.
That phrase around, particularly, let's say somebody gets a bonus, say, what am I going to do with it now? You don't have to do anything. And the reason that I say that is I put this to somebody who's jogging or walking around the car at the moment. Think of 10 good things that would happen right now if you simply had more money in your bank account. And that doesn't involve spending it. Like, maybe it is, if a special offer came in for a piece of furniture you'd be looking at in 3 months' time, you'd have the money. If it was that you wanted to drop down to 4 days a week for a period of time in your career, you'd have the money. If it was that you were going to leave your job and set up a business, you'd have the money. So like, when it comes to doing things with money, it's actually a very good thing to sometimes not do anything.
Yep.
Is simply leave it there. And a book recommendation around that is The Psychology of Money by Mark and Housel, like a real classic. That's there's an awful lot of benefit of actually not doing anything. So I put it into the pension. The pension, it automatically, number 1 goes into the pension, and number 2 is automatically invested in the pension. And the third thing is that it saves the tax as a result of it being in the pension in the first place. So I have all that on autopilot, and I don't have to make that decision every month. But then when the money comes in, when my wages do come in, I don't necessarily do anything.
Yeah.
I just,
Deadly advice.
I know
You don't have to spend it.
I don't have to.
You have 5 minutes to check into your business. I know what you're going to look at.
Sure, you know well.
Signpost.
Yes, the signpost. Yeah. I do all of the things that I said there. I'm even looking at them now in the dashboard that I have, and I could look at them in 30 seconds. I don't even need the 5 minutes. And such a great set of indicators.
That's definitely reinforcing again. And we've already got 2 more left. Most underrated business skill:
decision making. It's something I really worked on in 2023. I read a book about becoming a better business decision maker, and I realised after reading that book, I read it in an afternoon, one Sunday afternoon, sitting beside a pool. Like, it was just a book that was in the place that I was staying, and I realised nobody teaches us how to make good decisions. It's not in any business course. It's not in a master's. It's not. Parents do it intuitively with their kids. They teach them right for wrong, or eating dessert after dinner, or how to handle bullying or whatever. But actually, decision making, it's something I've really worked at in 2023. I read a range of books around it, and I driven decision making down through the business as well, because that is a real empowerer for scale and for other things as well. But decision making it's a skill you can build, like how you make overnight oats. It's something you can really build. It's great.
Yeah. Okay. You can't remember what that book was called?
Oh, I can. The Decision Maker is the name of the book by Dennis. I think it's Bakke or Baker, Bakker. Also, Thinking in Bets by Annie Jukes. Great one as well. She's a professional poker player. And so, of course, her entire career and profession is built around making effective decisions. And then I got another one. I got on an airport in Sydney. I was flying from Sydney to Melbourne, and it was 50 different decision-making models. So one of them, and I'll be very brief on this, is, let's say, Caroline, you're thinking, right, I'm going to scale the training business or I will scale the podcast. And maybe you can do both, but think, right, which will I do? And let's say you decide to do one, and you just sit with that decision for 3 days. Like, what would you do? Well, you probably, grow your potential sponsors. You'd probably think about, how could I do collaborations with people outside of Ireland and the UK? You'd probably think, is there a way in which that I can leverage AI to make my preparation more effective or whatever? Or let's say then you decide for another 3 days, I'm going to scale the training business. Then you think, right, well, could I create an ecosystem? Is there a training course I could go on? Is there a methodology that I could create that is the DIG methodology, let's say? And then at the end of the 2 sets,
Love that, the DIG methodology.
oh, there you go. And so if you spend 3 days doing both of them and see how you feel at the other side, it'll be a lot easier to make the decision rather than going forwards and backwards. So I read, that book, 50 Decision-Making Models, is very, very helpful. So that's why I would say decision-making it's a really underrated. We don't talk enough about it at all, but it certainly sharpened my saw.
Oh, okay, I'm getting that. Finish this sentence for me. More business owners would succeed if they just, do I know what you're going to say?
Actually, I think I might surprise you, but
Okay.
it's just loved sales.
Is what?
Loved. So if they enjoy sales, if it's like, the reason people buy things is because the value of what they're getting is more than what they spend the money on. Is like, rather than think sales is manipulation or sales is, again, negative, just love sales, love the idea of just solving customer problems, of being hungry to turn a conversation into an outcome, of being willing to find your own way of closing the sale. Like, if you sell more and your price is right and the finance is right, that things are profitable of what you're selling, it can make life an awful lot easier. Just love it.
More business owners would succeed if they loved
Sales.
love to sell. That's interesting because, again, you're always like, oh, I don't want to sell.
Yeah. Whereas love it. Embrace it. Yeah.
Love it.
You are changing customers' lives. You're changing listeners' lives every day that you do one of these anyway. So
I know, but talking about that, like, and I know we're wrapping up now, but the influence that people have. Like, some people said to me, Susan, about, because of, I suppose, in my other work with Big Mama, I'd be considered an influencer in what people would consider now influencers and marketing and all that. And I'm doing it in inverted commas for those who aren't watching. But I always say to business owners when I'm training them, you're an influencer, and your customer, you're an influencer too. And they're like, I don't want to be an influencer. I'm like, you're an influencer, because if somebody walks into your shop, somebody walks into your solicitors, you're going to influence them to make a decision to work with you. So we're all influencers. So I'm giving out information, you're giving out information, but business owners need to think of themselves as that as well, because it's a responsibility, isn't it? Did it fully come to you?
Oh, it is. It's a responsibility and it's privilege. I think, remember that I didn't know until a few minutes ago that I was being referred to as, what would Susan Hayes Culleton do in the conversations between you and Mary? Yeah, but there's a great privilege in it, but a great responsibility that comes with that. And particularly as well, when people talk about role models, we can shy away from that term. But we've a responsibility to be that for, whether it's the next generation or people looking on. And I mean, I'm standing on the shoulders of so many amazing people, women and men, but so many people who have enabled or have let me see them as their role model. So it's a very positive thing to be called an influencer. But yeah, it certainly comes with great responsibility, but you're shouldering that very well, Caroline, to be fair to you.
Oh, sorry, thank you. I enjoy the fact that we can make positive impact, and I love it. And I think other business owners should realise that within their profession and their niche, they can be the influencer that people look to for the advice, for the brilliant products and all. So it's a whole other conversation, but I just wanted to sort of end that. I never even told you at the start. Do you know what this is?
It's a clicker.
That's what. So it really broke, because when Susan says something good, I'm like, this is unreal. And I'm clicking like mad. I've told people before this, but I forgot to tell you what it was at the start. So I was clicking like mad there. So the production company, this is good. I think this is good. We need to pull this out to tell people more about. So I think it's broke. I think it's broke after you. But I just want to say thank you for being on the Dig podcast. You travelled all the way up here to be here, and I don't take that for granted either. You're so busy. But I think you're amazing at the work you do, and you're so kind as well. A nice person to be around as well. We have to crack, and just you need that too. You need to be a people person, I think, sometimes when you're doing our kind of work, and have that genuine kind of nature, and you do have that. So,
well, thanks a million for having me, and also just thank you very much to your community as well, like the people who responded to both you and me after the last time, and hopefully will do again. To be given an hour of their time and your time. I'm really grateful for that, and hope that the conversation today has been useful and practical for them. And keep going, Caroline, with what you're doing. There's a lot more for you to do, but you're as you say yourself, you're getting there, and I deserve to.
Thank you very much, and thanks for all the great advice there and the case study as well. And we will see you again soon, hopefully.
Look forward to it.
The Dig podcast. Thank you.